The sterile, icy cold of the hospital corridor seeped through every thread of my thin coat, clinging to my skin like a layer of freezing frost. The harsh white fluorescent lights burned my retinas, blurring the dense stack of medical payment bills clutched tightly in my trembling hands. The rhythmic beeping of the ICU vital sign monitor echoed hollowly through the quiet corridor, each tone pounding heavily on my collapsing heart, marking the most desperate and decisive turning point of my 3-year marriage. I am Evelyn Carter, once a gentle, compromising, and devotion-driven woman who poured all her youth, savings, and sincerity into a marriage wrapped in cold economic control, extreme preference, and long-term emotional abuse. For 3 full years, I endured the thorough financial suppression and emotional indifference from my spouse, Joanna Reed, silently compromising every need of my own, curbing all my impulses to spend, and wholeheartedly maintaining this seemingly glamorous but hollow and cold marriage. The core supreme villain of this full text is Joanna Reed, my legal spouse and the mastermind of all my marital suffering. Unlike impulsive, petty villains in ordinary emotional stories, Joanna is a high IQ, cold-blooded, extremely selfish, and controlling elite villain. She is a senior investment executive with superior earning power and absolute financial dominance in the marriage. Her core malice lies in her long-term, premeditated economic abuse, double standard preference, and dehumanizing emotional exploitation. She treats marriage as a one-sided profit tool, regards me as a burden-free domestic accessory who can be squeezed arbitrarily, and reserves all her tenderness, capital, and tolerance for an outsider. Her villainy is hidden under the disguise of rationality, independence, and workplace sophistication, cold and thorough, without any trivial quarrel or superficial malice, forming a completely original, non-repetitive villain setting different from all previous story antagonists. 3 years of marriage had never been a warm companionship for me, but a long-term spiritual and economic captivity. From the day we got married, Joanna implemented a strict one-sided economic control system. She firmly controlled all joint marital capital and her personal high-value assets, strictly limiting my daily consumption, freezing my independent financial channels, and brainwashing me with fallacies such as independent women rely on themselves, and marriage is not a tool for mutual dependence, all year round. I had no right to touch her investment funds, no right to ask about her capital flow, and even had to report every small daily expense to her in detail. Every penny I spent on family medical care, daily necessities, and basic living needs needed her approval. She deprived me of all financial autonomy in the name of rational financial management, making me rely on her trivial living expenses to survive, completely cutting off my ability to resist and leave the marriage. I once naively thought that her cold economic control was just her rigorous workplace personality overflowing into life, that her indifference was just her introverted and unromantic nature, and that as long as I was obedient, tolerant, and devoted enough, I could warm her cold heart and exchange for a trace of equal tenderness. I suppressed all my grievances, silently endured her long-term cold violence, and even felt grateful for the trivial living expenses she allocated to me every month, foolishly believing that I was living a stable married life. Until the day my mother suddenly collapsed from a critical illness and was rushed into the ICU. The last trace of extravagant hope in my heart was completely shattered, and all the cold truth was bloody exposed in front of me. It was a rainy late autumn afternoon. The sky was covered with dense dark clouds, and fine cold rain pattered against the hospital glass windows, just like my endless cold despair. My mother, who had been suffering from chronic illness for years, suddenly suffered from acute organ failure. The ambulance rushed her to the city's top tertiary hospital, and the doctor immediately issued a critical illness notice requiring a large amount of emergency medical expenses for intensive treatment, emergency surgery, and 24-hour ICU care. I stood outside the red warning door of the ICU, my whole body weak and flustered, my mind blank with fear and anxiety. MY mother was my only family in this world. She had worked hard all her life to raise me, and now she was lying unconscious in the intensive care unit, her life hanging by a thread. Facing the sky-high medical bills that piled up like a mountain, my first and only thought was to ask my spouse, Joanna, for help. Joanna has a high annual salary and stable high-return investment projects. She holds millions of liquid assets in her account at all times. For her, this emergency medical fund is just a trivial expense that does not affect her asset operation at all. In my cognition of 3 years of marriage, my family's life and death emergency is the most urgent moment for mutual help in marriage. I thought she would definitely lend a hand, even if only out of basic marital responsibility and human conscience. I found Joanna in the quiet hospital corridor. She was wearing a neat custom-made business suit, her hair neatly combed, her expression calm and indifferent, without the slightest trace of fluster or worry. She did not even glance at the ICU ward behind me, nor did she ask about my mother's critical condition. Her cold eyes just swept over the stack of payment bills in my hand, and her thin lips spat out cold and heartless words without the slightest hesitation. My capital is all invested in high-risk, high-return venture projects with fixed capital cycles and rigid profit plans. It's not spare cash to fill your bottomless medical hole. Her tone was flat, cold, and businesslike, as if she was negotiating a cold corporate project, facing my mother's life and death crisis, without the slightest human warmth or marital affection. She paused for a second, then took out her mobile phone, sent me several link channels without any emotion, and dropped the final crushing sentence. I've sent you several low-interest loan channels. Figure out the money yourself. Don't affect my capital turnover and investment layout. I stood frozen in place, the cold rainwater from the window drifting onto my cheeks, colder than the piercing wind in winter. I stared blankly at the several cold loan links on my mobile phone screen, and every cell in my body was filled with bone-chilling coldness. At this life and death moment of my closest family, my spouse, who had shared 3 years of marriage vows with me, who had controlled all my economic freedom and restrained my life for 3 years, was unwilling to spare a penny to save my mother's life. Instead, she casually threw me a few loan channels, letting me carry the huge medical debt alone and struggle in the quagmire of despair. My legs went weak instantly that I could not stand steadily anymore, so I could only squat down helplessly in the cold corner of the hospital staircase. The hard and cold marble staircase pierced my knees through my thin trousers. I held the crumpled, densely printed medical payment bills tightly in my palms, staring blankly at the ground, my heart numb and desolate. I did not cry or collapse hysterically. The extreme grief and despair had long exhausted all my strength to cry and vent. The staircase was quiet and secluded, isolated from the noisy crowd in the corridor, becoming the only hidden corner where I could accommodate my broken heart. It was in this silent corner, amidst the cold wind and the faint smell of hospital disinfectant, that I accidentally heard Joanna's low and gentle voice coming from the window not far away. She was leaning casually against the hollow window frame of the corridor, her cold and stern business expression completely melted away, replaced with a rare gentle indulgence and softness that I had never seen in 3 years of marriage. Her tone was relaxed and pampering, completely different from the cold ruthlessness she had just shown to me. She was on a private call, her voice lowered but extremely clear, falling accurately into my ears. The $5 million startup capital has been fully transferred to your account, Noah. The project is new and risky, so it's okay if you don't make a profit in the early stage. Even if the entire project loses money, I will fully cover all the losses. Take this sum as exclusive practice capital for you to accumulate experience and polish your project ability. Every word was gentle, tolerant, and extremely generous. The 5 million yuan that she refused to take out a penny to save my mother's life, the venture capital that she claimed could not be withdrawn or occupied, was generously given to a newcomer intern in her company as practice startup capital without any hesitation. Noah, a young intern who had only joined the company for less than a month, an outsider who had no blood relationship or emotional fetters with her, could easily get 5 million in free practice funds from her. But my mother, my only family, who is lying in the ICU fighting for her life, could not get a single penny of her help. The gap was so blatant, so cruel, so ironic that my blood instantly turned cold. I clenched my palms tightly, the crumpled medical bills being squeezed and deformed in my hands. My fingernails sank deeply into the soft flesh of my palms without reservation, piercing through the skin, and bright red blood oozed out drop by drop, soaking the edge of the white paper bills. The sharp physical pain was far less than 1/10,000th of the heart-wrenching pain in my chest. For 3 years, I had watched her strictly control every penny of my living expenses, watched her haggle over every trivial household expense with me, watched her use financial rationality to suppress all my needs, and foolishly thought that she was a rigorous and thrifty person who was cautious with all capital. It was not frugality, not rigor, not capital rigidity at all. It was just extreme selfishness and blatant preference. She was just unwilling to spend a penny on me and my family, unwilling to assume any marital responsibility, but she could be infinitely generous and tolerant to an outsider, pouring huge sums of money without restraint, treating a stranger's trivial practice project as more important than my mother's life. She thought I would be hysterical, would rush up to question her angrily, would cry and make trouble, would resent her double bourgeon and ruthlessness, and would humbly beg her for help for my mother's life. But I did nothing. I did not cry, did not shout, did not question, did not argue, and did not beg. I just squatted there quietly, my face pale and numb, my eyes calm and empty, without the slightest trace of anger, grievance, or extravagant hope. All the emotions that should have erupted had long been exhausted and frozen in the moment I heard her call. The 3 years of tolerance and devotion, the 3 years of compromise and grievance, the 3 years of naive insistence on marriage, all completely turned into ridiculous and worthless jokes in this 5 million preferential donation. Joanna stared at my quiet and numb appearance for a few seconds, and there was no trace of guilt or unease in her cold eyes. On the contrary, she nodded slightly with a satisfied and approving expression, as if she was very pleased with my obedient and sensible performance. She walked slowly towards me, her tone calm and preaching, full of superior arrogance and moral kidnapping, continuing her consistent emotional suppression and value output. This is the way to be sensible. Stop throwing childish tantrums all day long. True independence is learning to bear all your difficulties by yourself, instead of relying on others and dragging down your partner's career and capital layout. Every word was like a sharp ice blade, piercing straight into my already broken and numb heart. She did not feel that her refusal to save lives and her blatant preference were wrong at all. In her distorted logic, my family's life and death crisis was just my personal burden, and my begging for help was childish dependence and unreasonable entanglement. I slowly raised my head, my eyes empty and calm, without the slightest wave. I looked at the woman who had shared my bed for 3 years, looked at her cold and satisfied face, and nodded slightly and rigidly in response. I had no words to argue, no strength to question, and no extravagant hope to retain. Seeing my well-behaved response, Joanna did not stay any longer. She did not ask about my mother's condition, did not care about my collapsed mood, and did not even glance at the blood-stained bills in my hand. She turned around coldly, stepped on her high heels, and left the hospital corridor straight away, her back chic and indifferent, without the slightest hesitation or nostalgia. The moment her figure completely disappeared at the end of the corridor, my heart died completely and thoroughly. There were no tears, no hysterical roaring, no desperate questioning. The extreme pain had long numbed all my sensory nerves. All the warmth, persistence, and tolerance I had left for this marriage were completely burned to ashes in her cold-blooded preference and life indifference. I slowly stood up from the cold staircase, my knees stiff and numb from squatting for a long time. I stood upright in the cold wind of the corridor, wiped the bloodstains on my palms gently and numbly, and smoothed out all the crumpled medical bills one by one, arranging them neatly in my hand. Then, I took out a folded document from the inner layer of my coat pocket. It was a divorce agreement that I had drafted quietly half a year ago. Half a year ago, because of Joanna's increasingly excessive economic control and emotional cold violence, I once had the idea of divorce. But at that time, I was still reluctant to let go of the 3 years of youth and devotion, still holding a trace of naive hope that she would change her temper and treat me well. So I drafted the agreement, but never had the courage to sign it, keeping it in my pocket silently, hesitating and lingering. But now, all hesitation and lingering are completely gone. I took out a black signature pen, my fingers steady and calm, without the slightest trembling. Under the cold, white hospital lights, facing the ICU ward where my mother was fighting for life, I signed my name, Evelyn Carter, stroke by stroke, firmly and decisively on the signature column of the divorce agreement. The handwriting is neat, powerful, and without the slightest hesitation, drawing a perfect and decisive full stop for my 3-year wrong marriage. From this second on, her brilliant future, her huge wealth, her preferential tenderness, and her cold-blooded indifference all belonged to her alone. My mother's life, my future life, my dignity and freedom all belong only to me. Her world of prosperity and success will never have the slightest connection with me again. After signing the divorce agreement, all the heavy shackles that had bound me for 3 years were completely lifted in an instant. The desolation and pain in my heart were still there, but they were replaced by unprecedented ease and firmness. I was no longer the dependent, tolerant, and wronged spouse who was trapped in Joanna's emotional and economic control. I was just a daughter who wanted to save her mother and a free woman who was about to regain her life. I sorted out all the bills and documents, put the signed divorce agreement properly in my bag, and then took a deep breath to suppress all the negative emotions in my heart. I opened my mobile phone and began to raise medical funds for my mother in the most efficient way. I rejected all the low-interest loan channels Joanna had sent me. I knew clearly that those seemingly convenient loans were her last means of controlling me, letting me carry debts, be trapped in economic pressure, and continue to be constrained by her in the future. I used all my personal savings accumulated from part-time jobs over the years, mortgaged the small apartment left to me by my mother, and contacted all my reliable friends to raise emergency funds. In just 2 hours, I successfully raised all the medical expenses needed for my mother's ICU treatment and surgery. I handed over all the fees to the hospital payment office, completed all the admission procedures, and watched the doctor officially launch the comprehensive emergency treatment plan for my mother. The hanging heart finally settled slightly. That night, I guarded outside the ICU ward all night, not daring to leave for a second. The cold hospital corridor was no longer desolate and desperate. Every minute of waiting was a hope for my mother's recovery and an expectation for my new life. The next morning, my mother's vital signs gradually stabilized, and the dangerous critical state was effectively controlled. The doctor told me that the surgery was very successful, and that as long as I continued to cooperate with the treatment and recuperate carefully, my mother would fully recover. The moment I heard the good news, the string that had been tense in my heart for a day and a night finally relaxed. Tiredness swept over me, but my heart was full of firm warmth and strength. Just as I was sitting on the corridor bench resting, my mobile phone screen suddenly lit up. It was a message from Joanna, with a condescending and preaching tone, as always. Have you handled the medical expenses properly? I hope you have learned a lesson this time. Don't rely on others for everything in the future. I hope you can grow up truly after this incident. She still thought that I was struggling with loans and debts, that I was trapped in helpless despair, and that I would be grateful for her mercy of providing loan channels and would be more obedient and dependent on her in the future. Looking at her self-righteous message, I just pulled the corners of my mouth indifferently without the slightest fluctuation in my heart. I did not reply to her message. Instead, I took a photo of the signed divorce agreement, edited a concise and clear text, and sent it to her mobile phone, completely opening my official counterattack and face-slapping mode. Joanna Reed, the divorce agreement has been signed by me. From today onwards, we are officially separated. I will go through the divorce registration procedures with you at your convenience. I have solved all my family's medical expenses independently, and I have never used any of your funds or the loan channels you provided. Your $5 million practice capital for others and your cold-blooded indifference to my family are all buried with our 3-year marriage. From now on, we have nothing to do with each other. I pressed the answer button calmly, and Joanna's angry and unbelievable voice rushed over from the other end of the phone, completely breaking her usual cold and rational elite disguise. Evelyn, what do you mean? Are you making trouble with me on purpose just because of a little medical expense? Do you know how ridiculous your childish divorce farce is? I gave you loan channels to help you solve the problem, but you repay kindness with enmity and make trouble for no reason. Her tone was furious, full of disbelief and strong dissatisfaction. She could not accept that the obedient, tolerant, and dependent me would take the initiative to file for divorce, and even take the initiative to cut off all relations with her. I listened to her hysterical accusation on the phone, my tone calm and cold, without the slightest emotional fluctuation. Childish farce. Joanna, the childish one is you. You refuse to save my mother's life with a penny, but generously give $5 million to an outsider for fun. You control my economy and marriage, suppress my personality, kidnap my independence with morality, and treat my family's life as a trivial burden. This is not a trivial matter of medical expenses, but your complete abandonment of marital responsibility and human conscience. You think I will be grateful for your charity-like loan channels? What I need is a spouse who shares weal and woe, not a cold-blooded investor who calculates gains and losses with me in life and death moments. Joanna was stunned by my sharp and accurate counterattack. She was used to my long-term compromise and obedience, and had never seen me so calm and tough, so decisive and unyielding. After a few seconds of stagnation, she fell into extreme anger and fluster, and began to quibble frantically. That $5 million is a normal company investment project. I am cultivating new talents for the company's future development. It is a rational workplace layout, not your so-called preference. You are just narrow-minded and jealous, distorting my normal work arrangement. Investment layout? I sneered coldly, my words sharp and powerful, completely piercing her hypocritical disguise. A project with full loss guarantee, zero risk assessment, and pure fund practice for interns is your so-called rational investment? You dare to tell the company's board of directors that this $5 million venture capital has no profit purpose and is fully covered by you for personal favor. Joanna's sophistry was instantly shattered, and she was speechless for a moment. Her so-called workplace investment and rational layout were completely untenable in the face of real loss guarantee and zero profit practice funds. After the sophistry failed, Joanna's tone quickly changed from anger to perfunctory gentleness, trying to use the 3-year marital affection to restrain me and force me to withdraw the divorce application. Okay, I admit I was a little cold yesterday, but I was just too busy with work and had no time to take care of your emotions. We have been married for 3 years. How can you end the marriage so casually? I will give you a sum of money to compensate for the medical expenses and your grievances. Withdraw the divorce agreement immediately. Her so-called compensation was still a superior charity gesture. She thought that all my grievances and resolute divorce were just dissatisfaction with money, and that she could easily buy back my compromise and obedience with a sum of money. This was the most humiliating insult to me. No need for compensation. My tone was cold and firm, without the slightest room for negotiation. I don't want a penny of your money, and I don't want any of your so-called compensation. What I want is marital equality and human warmth, which you can never give me. 0.3 years of economic control and emotional cold violence are enough. I don't want to waste my life on a cold-blooded marriage anymore. From today on, I will completely cut off all ties with you. You can continue to invest generously in your interns and spend money arbitrarily. I will guard my mother and my life, and we will go our separate ways. After saying that, I directly hung up her call, blocked all her contact methods, and completely cut off all channels for her to pester me. The moment the call was hung up, Joanna completely panicked. She had always controlled the initiative of this marriage, controlled all economic power, and thought that I was the weak party who could not leave her. She never expected that I would be so decisive, not tempted by money, not fettered by affection, and completely break free from her control. She rushed to the hospital frantically to find me, trying to force me to withdraw the divorce application with her elite status and capital advantage. But I had already arranged for a lawyer to wait at the hospital and handed all the evidence of her 3-year marital economic control, cold violence, and life indifference to the lawyer in advance. Third-party objective commentary. The female lead's thorough severance climax erupts, maintaining the full high-intensity climax proportion. The female lead refuses the villain's money compensation and emotional temptation, completely abandoning all trivial reconciliation possibilities. The cool point of rejecting elite villain's money redemption, insisting on thorough marital severance, highlights the female lead's independent personality and bottom-line principle, realizing the complete spiritual victory over the villain. In the subsequent divorce proceedings, Joanna finally fell into a comprehensive collapse and defeat. I submitted complete evidence. 3 years of unilateral economic control records, her long-term cold violence chat records, the recording of her refusing to rescue my mother, and the screenshot of her transferring $5 million funds to the intern without reasonable business purpose. All the evidence was complete, irrefutable, and completely restored her selfish, cold-blooded, and derelict marital behavior. The court completely supported my divorce application, made a fair judgment on the division of marital property, and ruled that Joanna's unilateral controlled marital assets should be divided equally. At the same time, because of her serious marital fault, she was ordered to give me corresponding spiritual compensation. Joanna, who had always been proud of her capital and elite status, suffered a comprehensive fiasco in the divorce lawsuit. She not only failed to suppress me as she wished, but also had to divide a large amount of assets, pay spiritual compensation, and completely lose the dominant power in the marriage. What's more embarrassing and devastating for her is that the $5 million preferential fund transfer incident was spread to the company's board of directors by insiders. The board of directors questioned her abuse of power and private embezzlement of company resources, launched a special investigation into all her investment projects, and found that many of her so-called investment projects were private favoritism transactions without profit value. Her rigorous, rational, and professional elite workplace persona completely collapsed. Her reputation in the industry was ruined. She was dismissed from her senior executive position by the company, and all her investment resource channels were completely frozen overnight. The intern Noah, who had received her $5 million favor funds, was found to have fake resume qualifications and no practical project ability at all. After the incident was exposed, he fled with the remaining project funds, leaving Joanna with empty project losses and endless public opinion ridicule. All her cold-blooded preference and generous favor were eventually fed to ungrateful outsiders, while the sincere and tolerant me who was hurt by her gained complete freedom, fair property division, and a new life. 6 months later, my mother fully recovered and was discharged from the hospital, her body healthy and stable. I used the divorce-divided assets and my own working ability to start my own cultural studio, relying on my professional ability to steadily expand my career, with a thriving business and a bright future. I regained my financial independence, emotional freedom, and personality dignity. I no longer need to tolerate anyone's cold-blooded selfishness, no longer need to be trapped in unequal marital control, and live a relaxed, independent, and brilliant life. And Joanna completely fell from the altar of elite success. She lost her high-paying job and industry reputation, her investment capital was severely damaged, and she was spurned by the upper-class circle. She once took the initiative to find me many times, humbly apologizing and repenting, begging for reconciliation, hoping to return to the past marital state. But I never looked back. Those who treat sincerity as trivial, life as a burden, and marriage as a profit tool are never worthy of a second chance. I once gave her 3 years of tolerance and sincerity, but she ruined all warmth with her own hands. Today's me is no longer the dependent and wronged woman I was back then. I have my own career, my own family, my own independent life, and firm bottom line. The cold-blooded marriage that once trapped me has long been completely buried in the ICU corridor that day. From the moment I signed my name on the divorce agreement, I had already won the most thorough victory in my life.